The tray hit the floor at exactly 12:15 on a Tuesday, and the entire diner went silent. Lucas Reed was on his knees picking up broken ceramic when Alison Grant laughed, loud enough that everyone turned to look. She'd tripped him on purpose, her designer heels still extended into the narrow aisle between tables. No one said a word. They all saw the luxury sedan parked outside and knew exactly who she was. What they didn't know was that the quiet man wiping grease and humiliation off the linoleum floor had once destroyed careers far more powerful than hers. And today, he was done being invisible. The diner had been standing on the corner of Maple and 4th for 40 years, long enough that the vinyl booths had cracked and been patched with duct tape, long enough that the coffee tasted the same every morning because nobody bothered to change the brand. It wasn't the kind of place people chose. It was the kind of place people ended up. Truckers came through at dawn. Retirees filled the corner booth by the window. And Lucas Reed worked the floor 6 days a week, double shifts when Frank needed him, which was most of the time. He'd been there for 3 years, long enough that he knew how Mrs. Patterson took her eggs, long enough that he could pour coffee without looking, long enough that people stopped seeing him altogether. That was fine. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there because the rent was due every month, and his son needed new shoes every few months, and the diner paid in cash at the end of every week. No questions asked, no background checks. Just show up, keep your head down, and don't cause trouble. Lucas was good at not causing trouble. He moved through the narrow aisles with the kind of economy that came from years of practice, balancing trays, refilling ketchup bottles, wiping down tables before the previous customer's warmth had even left the seat. He didn't chat much, didn't smile unless it was required. Frank liked that about him. The customers didn't complain. In a place like this, invisible was valuable. His son was 7. His name was Danny, and he lived for dinosaurs and soccer, and the kind of questions that didn't have easy answers. Why don't we have a car? Why can't I have the sneakers with the lights in them? Why do you work so much? Lucas answered what he could and deflected the rest. Someday he'd tell Danny the whole story. Someday when the kid was old enough to understand that life didn't always go the way you planned, that sometimes you made choices that cost you everything, and sometimes you made choices that saved the only thing that mattered. For now, Danny stayed with Mrs. Kowalski 2 floors down while Lucas worked. She didn't charge much. She had grandkids of her own scattered across 3 states, and nobody visited anymore, so Danny filled a gap. It worked. Everything worked. As long as Lucas kept his head down and didn't make waves and showed up on time and stayed late when Frank asked. That was the deal. That was survival. Alison Grant walked into the diner at 11:45 on a Tuesday, and Lucas knew immediately she didn't belong. It wasn't just the clothes, though the tailored blazer and the heels that clicked against the linoleum were enough to turn heads. It was the way she moved, like she owned the room, like every space she entered rearranged itself around her. She didn't wait to be seated. She walked straight to a booth near the back, slid in, and tossed her phone on the table hard enough that it made a sound. Her assistant followed a few steps behind, a younger woman with a tablet, and an expression that suggested she'd spent the morning apologizing for things that weren't her fault. She sat across from Alison and said nothing. Smart. Lucas grabbed 2 menus and a pot of coffee and made his way over. He didn't recognize Alison, but he recognized the type. Rich, impatient, used to people jumping. He'd dealt with worse. "Good afternoon," he said, setting the menus down. "Coffee?" Alison didn't look up. She was scrolling through her phone, her jaw tight. "Black. And make sure it's hot this time." Lucas hadn't served her before. There was no "this time," but he didn't correct her. He just poured the coffee, set the pot down, and waited. "We'll need a few minutes," the assistant said quietly, glancing at Lucas with something that might have been an apology. "No problem." Lucas said. He turned to leave. Actually, Allison said, still staring at her phone. Do you have anything on the menu that isn't deep-fried or covered in gravy? Lucas stopped. We've got a grilled chicken salad. Comes with vinaigrette on the side. Does it come with attitude too? Allison looked up now, her eyes sharp. Or is that just you? The assistant's face went red. Lucas didn't react. He'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. No attitude, ma'am, he said evenly. Just letting you know what's available. Allison held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at her phone. Fine. The salad, no onions. And if there's so much as a single onion on that plate, I'm sending it back. Understood, Lucas said. He looked at the assistant. Anything for you? Just water, please, she said quietly. Lucas nodded and walked back toward the kitchen. Behind him, he heard Allison's voice, loud enough to carry. This place is a dump. I don't know why we stopped here. Frank was at the grill, flipping burgers with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for 30 years. He glanced up when Lucas clipped the order to the line. Grilled chicken, no onions, Lucas said. She's going to be a problem. Frank shrugged. They all are. Just keep her happy and get her out. Lucas didn't argue. He filled a water glass, grabbed a fresh pot of coffee, and went back out to the floor. The diner was filling up now. The lunch rush was starting. He moved between tables, taking orders, clearing plates, refilling drinks. He didn't think about Allison until he heard her voice again, sharper this time. Excuse me. Lucas turned. She was holding up her coffee cup. This is cold. It wasn't. He'd poured it less than 10 minutes ago. But he walked over anyway, pot in hand. I'll get you a fresh cup. You'll get me a fresh pot, Allison said. This one's been sitting out. Lucas poured from the same pot. The coffee steamed. He set the cup down in front of her. Anything else? Allison stared at the cup, then at him. She didn't say anything, but her expression said enough. Lucas turned and walked away. The salad came up a few minutes later. Lucas checked it himself before bringing it out. No onions. Vinaigrette on the side. He set it down in front of Allison without a word. She picked up her fork, moved a piece of lettuce around, then set the fork down. This is wilted. It wasn't. Would you like me to bring you something else? Lucas asked. I'd like you to bring me something edible, Allison said. She pushed the plate toward him. Try again. Lucas picked up the plate. He didn't say anything. He walked back to the kitchen, scraped the salad into the trash, and told Frank to make another one. Frank muttered something under his breath, but he did it. Lucas waited. He brought the second salad out. Set it down. Allison didn't even look at it. She was on her phone again. Leave it. Lucas left it. By 12:10, the diner was packed. Every booth was full, and there was a line forming near the door. Lucas moved through the chaos with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He didn't rush. Rushing led to mistakes. He just kept moving. Allison's assistant had left. Lucas didn't see her go, but the seat across from Allison was empty now, and Allison was alone with her phone and her untouched salad. She didn't seem to care that she was taking up a 4-person booth during the lunch rush. She didn't seem to care about anything except whatever was on her screen. Lucas was carrying a tray of food to table 9 when it happened. The aisle between the booths was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. He'd walked it 100 times that day alone. He knew the rhythm of it. Move with the tray balanced. Keep your eyes up. Step carefully. He didn't see Allison's foot until it was too late. The tray went down fast. 4 plates, 2 bowls of soup, and a basket of fries hit the floor in a crash that silenced the entire diner. Ceramic shattered. Soup spread across the linoleum in a slow, ugly wave. The fries scattered like confetti. Lucas went down with it. His knee hit the floor hard, and for a moment all he could do was kneel there in the mess, trying to figure out what had just happened. Then he heard the laughter. Allison was laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a surprised gasp. A full, loud, deliberate laugh. She looked right at him, her foot still extended into the aisle, and said, "You should be more careful." The diner was silent, except for her. Every customer, every server, every person in the room was watching, and nobody said a word. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, at the smile on her face, at the way she leaned back in her booth like she'd just won something, at the foot she was slowly pulling back under the table, as if the evidence didn't matter because nobody was going to challenge her anyway. He could feel the heat rising in his chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something he'd spent 3 years burying. Frank appeared from behind the counter, his face tight. "Lucas, clean it up." Lucas didn't move. "Lucas," Frank said again, quieter this time. "Just clean it up." Lucas looked down at the broken plates, the spilled food, the soup soaking into his jeans. He thought about Danny, about the rent, about the $73 in tips he'd made so far today. He thought about the fact that he needed this job, that he couldn't afford to lose it, that he'd promised himself he'd never make waves again. Then he thought about the way Allison was still smiling. He stood up slowly. Soup dripped from his hands. The entire diner was still watching. And for the first time in 3 years, Lucas Reed stopped playing invisible. Lucas didn't bend down to pick up the broken plates. Not yet. He stood there in the middle of the aisle, soup dripping from his fingers, and looked at Frank. The manager's face had gone pale, the kind of pale that came from knowing something bad was about to happen and being powerless to stop it. "Lucas," Frank said again, and this time his voice had an edge to it. Not anger. "Come on, let's just get this cleaned up." Lucas glanced around the diner. Every face was turned toward him. The couple in booth 3, the truck driver at the counter, the family with 2 kids near the window. They were all watching, waiting to see what he would do, waiting to see if he'd swallow it like he always did. He could see it in their eyes, the pity, the discomfort, the relief that it wasn't them. He looked back at Allison. She'd stopped laughing, but the smile was still there, smaller now, but still there. She took a sip of her coffee, slow and deliberate, like she was giving him time to make the right choice. The choice that kept everything smooth. The choice that kept her comfortable. Lucas bent down. He picked up the largest piece of broken ceramic and set it on the edge of the nearest table. Then he picked up another piece. And another. He worked methodically, his movements slow and controlled, while the entire diner held its breath. Frank let out a small, relieved sigh and went back behind the counter. A waitress Lucas barely knew brought over a plastic bin and a roll of paper towels. She set them down beside him without making eye contact, then disappeared back toward the kitchen. Lucas filled the bin with shards of plate and soaked fries and ruined food. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the scrape of ceramic against linoleum and the wet slap of towels against the floor. When the mess was mostly contained, Lucas stood up. His jeans were soaked through. His hands smelled like grease and chicken soup. He picked up the bin and carried it toward the back, past the counter, past Frank, past the line of customers who were suddenly very interested in their menus. He dumped the bin in the trash and washed his hands in the dish sink. The water was scalding, but he didn't pull away. He let it burn. He scrubbed his palms until they were raw, until the smell of the soup was gone, until his hands stopped shaking. When he came back out, the diner had started moving again. Conversations resumed. Forks scraped against plates. Someone laughed at something that had nothing to do with him. Lucas walked back to table 9 and took their order again. Apologized for the delay. told them their meals were on the house. They nodded, embarrassed, like they'd witnessed something private. He avoided Allison's booth. There were other tables to manage, other customers to serve, but he could feel her watching him, could feel the weight of her gaze every time he crossed the floor. She wasn't done. He knew that. People like her were never done. It was 12:30 when she called him over again. Lucas was refilling coffee at table 5 when he heard her voice, sharp and clear across the diner. "Excuse me. Waiter." He finished pouring the coffee, set the pot down, and walked over. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the table. At the salad she still hadn't touched. At the coffee cup, half empty now. "Yes, ma'am," Lucas said. His voice was flat. Professional. Empty. Allison leaned back in the booth, her arms crossed. "I'd like you to apologize." Lucas looked at her now. "Apologize for what?" "For tripping," Allison said, and the smile was back. Small and sharp. "For being careless, for ruining my lunch." The diner had gone quiet again. Not silent, but quiet enough that the people nearby could hear. Quiet enough that they were listening. "I didn't trip," Lucas said. "You stuck your foot out." Allison's smile didn't waver. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" Lucas didn't answer. There was no proof. Just her word against his, and everyone in this room knew whose word would matter more. "I think you're confused," Allison said. She leaned forward now, her voice dropping to something almost kind, almost gentle. "You were carrying too much. You weren't paying attention. It happens. All I'm asking for is a simple apology, and we can both move on." Lucas felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not anymore. Something colder. Something that had been asleep for 3 years and was starting to wake up. "I'm not going to apologize," he said. The kindness dropped from Allison's face. "Excuse me? I didn't do anything wrong," Lucas said. "So I'm not going to apologize." Allison stared at him. For the first time since she'd walked into the diner, she looked genuinely surprised. Like she'd expected resistance, but not this. Not from someone like him. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "No," Lucas said. "Should I?" Allison's jaw tightened. "I'm the CEO of Meridian Tech. We're worth $3.2 billion. I have lawyers on retainer who would eat this place for breakfast." She gestured around the diner, at the cracked vinyl and the flickering fluorescent lights. "Do you really want to make this difficult?" Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, at the expensive blazer and the manicured nails and the expression that said she'd never been told no in her life. He thought about all the people he'd met like her, all the boardrooms he'd sat in, all the threats he'd heard that sounded exactly like this one. "I don't want to make anything difficult," Lucas said. "I just want to do my job." "Then apologize," Allison said. Her voice was louder now, loud enough that the entire diner could hear. "Apologize, and I'll let this go." Lucas didn't move, didn't blink. "No." The word hung in the air, short, final, undeniable. Allison's face flushed. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," Lucas said. "But I'm still not apologizing." Frank appeared at Lucas's shoulder, moving faster than Lucas had seen him move in months. His face was red, his hands were shaking, and his voice came out in a rushed, panicked whisper. "Lucas, what are you doing?" Frank hissed. "Just say you're sorry. Just say it, and let's move on." Lucas didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Allison. Frank turned to Allison, his smile so forced it looked painful. "Mom, I am so sorry for this misunderstanding. Your meal is on the house, of course, and I'll personally make sure. I don't want my meal on the house, Allison interrupted. She was staring at Lucas, her eyes hard. I want him to apologize, or I want him fired. Frank's face went white. He looked at Lucas, then at Allison, then back at Lucas. Mom, please. I'm sure we can work this out without... One phone call, Allison said. She picked up her phone and held it up like a weapon. One phone call to the health department, one call to my lawyer, one review on every platform that matters, and this place will be done by the end of the month. Frank's hand was on Lucas's arm now, gripping hard. Lucas, please. Lucas could feel the entire diner watching, could feel the weight of their judgment, their discomfort, their desperate hope that he'd just give in so they could all go back to pretending this place was normal. He thought about Danny, about the $73 in tips, about the 3 years he'd spent learning how to be invisible. Then he thought about the way Allison had laughed. He reached down and untied his apron. The motion was slow, deliberate. He folded the apron once, then set it on the table in front of Allison. The fabric landed softly, but the sound it made might as well have been a gunshot. What are you doing? Frank's voice cracked. Lucas, don't. Lucas turned to Frank. I'm sorry, he said quietly. But I'm not doing this anymore. You're going to lose your job over this? Frank's eyes were wide, desperate. Over her? Lucas looked back at Allison. She was watching him with something that might have been curiosity. Might have been amusement. He couldn't tell. If you want to talk, Lucas said to her, his voice steady. We can do it outside. Allison tilted her head. Why would I want to talk to you? Because I think you should know who you just tried to humiliate, Lucas said. For the first time, something flickered across Allison's face. Not fear, not yet, but something close. Uncertainty. I know exactly who you are, she said. You're a waiter in a dying diner who just made the worst decision of his life. Lucas didn't argue. He just turned and walked toward the door. He didn't look back. Didn't check to see if she was following. He just pushed through the glass door and stepped out into the parking lot, into the cold November air that stung his face and cleared his head. Behind him, he heard the door open again. Allison stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. She'd left her phone inside, but she'd brought her confidence. It radiated off her like heat. This better be good, she said. Because I have a meeting in 20 minutes, and you've already wasted enough of my time. Lucas turned to face her. The parking lot was mostly empty. A few cars scattered across faded lines. The sun was high and bright, and there were no witnesses out here. No audience. Just the two of them. I used to do what you do, Lucas said. Allison laughed. You used to run a tech company? No, Lucas said. I used to destroy them. The laugh died. Allison's expression shifted, just slightly. What are you talking about? Lucas slid his hands into his pockets. I was an internal investigator for Vanguard Solutions. Maybe you've heard of them. He watched her face, saw the flicker of recognition. I spent 8 years digging through financial records, tracking offshore accounts, interviewing employees who were too scared to go on the record. Lucas continued. I found the things people like you thought were buried, and when I found them, I made sure the right people knew about it. Allison's jaw tightened. You're lying. 3 CEOs lost their jobs because of me, Lucas said. 2 of them went to prison. One of them killed himself before the trial even started. The color drained from Allison's face. I was good at it, Lucas said. Really good. I liked it too. Liked the power, liked watching people who thought they were untouchable realize they weren't. He looked at her, his voice even. People like you. Allison took a step back. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something. Lucas said. I left that life. I walked away from it because it cost me everything that mattered. My wife, my family, my sense of who I was. I came here because I thought I could be someone different, someone quiet, someone who didn't make waves. He took a step toward her, not threatening, just closing the distance. But you made a mistake today, Lucas said. You humiliated me in front of a room full of people because you thought I was nobody. You thought I had no power, no leverage, no way to fight back. Allison's hand moved toward her pocket, where her phone should have been. It wasn't there. I'm not going to hurt you, Lucas said. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm just going to give you some advice. Allison didn't say anything. For the first time since she'd walked into the diner, she looked genuinely afraid. Go back to your office, Lucas said. Go back to your meetings and your lawyers and your $3.2 billion company. And when you're sitting in your corner office tonight, thinking about how this could have gone differently, remember one thing. He leaned in, just close enough that she could hear him clearly. You have no idea who you're looking at when you look at someone, Lucas said. You have no idea what they've survived, what they're capable of, what they've given up just to stay standing. He stepped back. I lost everything once because I couldn't let things go, Lucas said. I'm not going to lose anything else. Not my dignity, not my self-respect. And definitely not because of someone like you. Allison stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had nothing to say. Lucas turned and walked back toward the diner. He didn't look back, didn't wait to see what she would do. He just pulled open the glass door and stepped inside, back into the noise and the chaos, and the life he'd built from nothing. Frank was standing behind the counter, his face ashen. The diner was still quiet, still watching. Lucas walked past him, past the booths, past the customers who quickly looked away. He went into the back, grabbed his jacket from the hook by the dish pit, and walked out to the rear exit into the alley. He didn't go back inside. He'd said what he needed to say, done what he needed to do. And for the first time in 3 years, Lucas Reed didn't feel invisible anymore. The alley behind the diner smelled like grease and old cigarettes. Lucas leaned against the brick wall and stared at the dumpster across from him, at the rust spreading along its edges, at the bags of trash piled beside it that nobody had bothered to throw in. His hands were still shaking. Not from fear, from the adrenaline that came with breaking 3 years of careful silence in the space of 5 minutes. He'd meant every word he said to Allison. That was the part that surprised him. He'd thought the anger would feel good, that standing up for himself would bring some kind of satisfaction. But all he felt now was tired. Tired and uncertain, and acutely aware that he'd just walked away from the only income he had. The rear door of the diner opened, and Frank stepped out. He looked smaller out here, older. The fluorescent lights inside had hidden the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes. He let the door close behind him and stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure what to say. She left, Frank said finally. Didn't pay, didn't say a word, just grabbed her stuff and walked out. Lucas nodded. He wasn't surprised. Frank took a few steps closer, then stopped. What you said in there, about being an investigator, was that true? Yeah, Lucas said. Why didn't you ever mention it? Lucas looked at him. Would it have mattered? Frank thought about that. Probably not, he admitted. But it explains a few things. Like what? Like why you never talked much, Frank said. Like why you were always so careful. Like why you showed up every day on time and never asked for anything. He shook his head. I thought you were just desperate for the job. Turns out you were hiding. Lucas didn't argue. It was true. He had been hiding. From his old life, from the choices he'd made, from the version of himself that had been so good at tearing people apart that he'd forgotten how to put himself back together. I can't keep you on, Frank said. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. You know that, right? Lucas nodded. I know. It's not personal. Frank continued. It's just, she's the kind of person who makes phone calls, and I can't afford to have the health department sniffing around, or lawyers asking questions, or bad reviews tanking what little business we have left. He rubbed his face. I'm sorry, Lucas. I really am. Don't be, Lucas said. I made the choice. Frank looked at him for a long moment, then pulled an envelope out of his back pocket. Your tips from the week. Counted it myself. $142. Lucas took the envelope. It felt light. Too light. Thanks. You need a reference, you let me know. Frank said. I'll tell whoever asks that you were the best server I ever had. Because you were. Lucas slid the envelope into his jacket pocket. Appreciate it. Frank turned to go, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you said something. I should have said something too. Should have backed you up. But I didn't. He met Lucas's eyes. That's on me. Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Frank went back inside, and the door swung shut behind him with a dull metallic thud. Lucas stayed in the alley for another few minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the lunch rush inside, the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation. It sounded distant now, like it belonged to someone else's life. He walked home. It took 40 minutes on foot, through neighborhoods that got quieter and shabbier the farther he went. By the time he reached his building, his feet hurt and his jeans were still damp, and he could feel the cold settling into his bones. Mrs. Kowalski answered her door on the second knock. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and hands that never stopped moving, always knitting or folding or adjusting something. Danny was on the floor behind her, building something out of blocks that looked like it was supposed to be a dinosaur but kept falling over. You're early, Mrs. Kowalski said, frowning. You sick? Something like that, Lucas said. He looked past her at Danny. Can I take him now? Mrs. Kowalski studied his face, then stepped aside. He ate lunch already. Turkey sandwich. He didn't want the crusts. Thanks, Lucas said. He walked in and crouched down next to Danny. Hey, buddy, ready to go? Danny looked up, his face lighting up. Dad, look, I made a T-Rex! Lucas looked at the pile of blocks. It didn't look like anything, but he nodded anyway. That's awesome. You want to bring it upstairs? Danny nodded and started gathering blocks. Lucas helped him, stacking them carefully so they wouldn't fall. Mrs. Kowalski watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. You lose your job? She asked. Lucas glanced at her. What makes you say that? You're home early. You smell like grease, and you look like someone just punched you in the stomach, Mrs. Kowalski said. I've seen that look before. Lucas stood up, a handful of blocks in his arms. I'll still pay you for watching him. Just might be a few days late. Mrs. Kowalski waved a hand. I'm not worried about the money. I'm worried about you. I'm fine, Lucas said. Sure you are, Mrs. Kowalski said. She didn't sound convinced, but she didn't push. You need anything, you knock on my door. Lucas nodded. Thanks. He took Danny upstairs to their apartment on the 3rd floor. It was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that only worked if you held the handle at exactly the right angle. Danny slept in the bedroom. Lucas slept on the couch. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Danny dumped the blocks on the floor and immediately started rebuilding his dinosaur. Lucas watched him for a moment, then went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. A carton of milk, half a loaf of bread, some cheese that was starting to harden at the edges. He'd need to go to the store soon. He'd need to figure out a lot of things soon. He sat down on the couch and pulled out the envelope Frank had given him. $142. He had another $300 in a jar under the sink, saved from the past few weeks. Rent was $650 a month, due in 8 days. That left him short by $208. And that didn't count food or utilities or the fact that Danny would need winter boots before the snow came. Lucas closed his eyes and leaned back against the couch. He could feel the exhaustion settling over him, heavy and familiar. He'd been here before. Not in this apartment, not with Danny, but in this place. The place where one choice, one moment of refusing to back down, had cost him everything. The difference was, this time, he didn't regret it. "Dad?" Lucas opened his eyes. Danny was standing in front of him, holding a plastic dinosaur in one hand. "Yeah, buddy. Are you okay?" Lucas looked at his son, at the concern in his eyes, the way he was holding the dinosaur like it was a shield. He was 7 years old, and he already knew something was wrong. Kids always knew. "I'm okay," Lucas said. He reached out and ruffled Danny's hair. "Just had a long day. Did something bad happen?" Lucas thought about that. About Allison's laugh. About the way the diner had gone silent. About the moment he'd untied his apron and decided he was done being invisible. "No," Lucas said. "Something good happened. I just don't know it yet." Danny frowned, trying to work that out. Then he shrugged and went back to his blocks. Lucas watched him build, watched him knock the tower down and start again, patient and determined. And he thought about what came next. He'd need to find another job. Something that paid cash. Something that didn't ask too many questions. He'd done it before. He could do it again. But this time, he wouldn't disappear. Wouldn't make himself smaller just to fit into spaces that weren't meant for him. He'd spent 3 years learning how to be invisible, and it had cost him more than any job was worth. Outside, the sun was starting to set. The light through the window turned golden, then orange, then dim. Danny eventually got tired and climbed onto the couch next to Lucas, curling up against his side. Lucas put an arm around him and felt the steady rhythm of his breathing. He thought about Allison Grant, about whether she'd gone back to her office, whether she'd told anyone what had happened, whether she'd spent even 5 minutes thinking about the man she'd tried to humiliate. He doubted it. People like her didn't think about people like him. That was the whole point. But she'd remember today. That much he knew. She'd remember the look on his face when he refused to apologize. She'd remember the parking lot, the conversation, the moment she realized she'd chosen the wrong person to mess with. And maybe, just maybe, the next time she walked into a place like that diner, she'd think twice before laughing. Lucas didn't go back to the diner the next day, or the day after that. He spent the time looking for work, making calls, filling out applications at places that didn't care about gaps in his resume. It was harder than he remembered. Most places wanted references. Most places wanted explanations. Most places took one look at him and saw exactly what he was. Someone who'd fallen and hadn't quite figured out how to get back up. But on the 4th day, he got a call from a warehouse on the edge of town. They needed someone for the night shift, loading trucks and moving inventory. It didn't pay much, but it was enough. Barely enough. He took it. Danny stayed with Mrs. Kowalski during the nights Lucas worked. She didn't charge extra, just told him to pay her when he could, and left a plate of food by her door every evening for him to take upstairs. Lucas didn't know how to thank her for that, so he just kept showing up, kept trying. 3 weeks after the incident at the diner, Lucas was walking home from the warehouse when he saw it. A small article in the business section of a newspaper someone had left on the bus. The headline read, "Meridian Tech CEO steps down amid internal review." Lucas stopped, read the article standing up, right there in the aisle, while the bus jolted and swayed around him. It didn't say much, just that Allison Grant had resigned, effective immediately, and that the company was conducting an internal investigation into unspecified financial irregularities. No details, no accusations, just enough to let people know that something had gone very wrong. Lucas folded the paper and tucked it under his arm. He didn't know if what happened at the diner had anything to do with it. Probably not. People like Allison didn't fall because of one bad day. They fell because they'd been falling for a long time and nobody had noticed. But still, he let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she'd thought about it. Maybe she'd gone back to her office that day and looked at herself differently. Maybe she'd realized that power built on fear only lasted as long as people were willing to be afraid. When Lucas got home, Danny was asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to his chin. Mrs. Kowalski was sitting in the chair by the window, knitting something that looked like it might become a scarf. "Long night?" she asked. "Long few weeks," Lucas said. He sat down on the floor next to the couch, close enough to Danny that he could hear him breathing. Mrs. Kowalski looked at him over her knitting needles. "You doing okay?" Lucas thought about that. About the warehouse and the ache in his back, and the $142 that was already gone. About the diner and the parking lot, and the moment he'd decided he was done being small. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." Mrs. Kowalski nodded, like that was the answer she'd been waiting for. She went back to her knitting, and Lucas sat there on the floor, watching his son sleep, feeling the weight of everything he'd lost and everything he still had. The apartment was quiet. The city outside was loud. And somewhere out there, in a corner office or a courtroom or a place Lucas would never see, Allison Grant was learning the same lesson he'd learned 3 years ago. Power didn't come from money or titles or the ability to make people afraid. It came from knowing who you were and refusing to let anyone take that away from you. Lucas had forgotten that for a while, but he remembered now, and he wasn't going to forget again.